Hey everyone, Nick Marzinski here from TrappingLight.com, and this is the third tutorial that I'm recording about using Photoshop or Photoshop Elements to design a holiday card or a scrapbooking page or that sort of thing. And this time I'm going to be talking about clipping masks because they're very, very useful for laying out your design on a document. But before we get into how they're used, I want to just start off with a simple example that illustrates what they are. What I have here in my document is a blue circle on top of a white background, which you can see here in my layer stack. Now, just for fun, what I'm going to do is I'm going to add an invert layer, adjustment layer to the document. So I'm going to click on the Add Adjustment Layer icon and click Invert. Now, what an invert adjustment layer does is it makes all of the colors in the image their opposite. So white in this case becomes black, and blue in this case becomes yellow, okay? And this is fine, but let's say that I want to apply this adjustment layer here only to the circle, so that the circle turns yellow, but the background remains white. Well, there's a few different ways to do that. Now, this adjustment layer here, you can see in the layer stack, comes with its own layer mask. So I could just simply grab a brush by pressing B and make sure that my foreground color is set to black and that the layer mask on the layer stack right here is selected, and then simply paint. And if I paint with black, it hides the layer mask, or it hides the layer, the invert layer, and so what's underneath it is revealed. Okay? And this works, I guess, but it's complicated and it's really tough for me to get a good mask around the edges of my circle. So I'm going to delete this adjustment layer and try something else. Another way that I could do this would be to select my circle by pressing and holding Control or Command on my keyboard and then clicking on the shape layer in the layer stack. When I do that, you can see that I get the marching ants around the circle. Now I just come over here and select my invert adjustment layer. And what you can see is that it applied the adjustment layer right to the circle. Because the circle was selected when I added the adjustment layer, it's automatically masked. So this is great, and this gets me what I want. But then let's say that I decide to move my circle. So I'm going to hit V to bring up the Move tool. I'm going to click on the circle layer here on my layer stack, and I'm going to move my circle. And what just happened? Well, what happened is that I moved the circle here, but I didn't move the invert mask. See, the mask is on the invert adjustment layer, but I'm not moving the invert adjustment layer when I move the circle. So that mask isn't moving at all. Now, if I wanted to, I could undo that and then select both layers by holding down Shift and clicking on the ellipse layer as well as the invert layer. At this point, I can move both of them around, and you can see what happens in the layer stack when I move the circle. The invert mask here also moves. And that's fine and that works, but there's a simpler way. So again, I'm going to delete my invert layer. Now, for this third way of doing things, what if instead of using a layer mask like I've been using for the past two examples, I could get Photoshop instead to treat this shape layer, this circle right here, itself as a mask. Now that would solve both of my problems at once. Not only could I apply my invert layer just to the circle, but since the circle itself is the mask, whatever changes I make to that circle, if I move it, if I transform it or distort it, will simultaneously be made to that mask. And here's how you can do that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to add an invert layer again. And you can see that it applies it to the whole image. Now, with that invert layer selected in my layer stack, I'm going to press Control, Alt, and G, or Command, Option, G on a Mac. And voila. Now, if you look at the layer stack, you can see what happened. The invert layer now is indented with a little arrow that's pointing down at the ellipse layer, the circle layer right here. This is called a clipping mask. What I've done is I've clipped this invert layer here to the layer below it. That means that any changes that this clipped invert layer are making will only be applied inside of the layer, in this case the circle, that it's clipped to. Furthermore, these clipping masks are stackable. So if I wanted to, say, add a hue saturation adjustment layer and then take down the brightness, as you can see right here, it's decreasing the brightness on the entire image. However, if I make sure that it's selected again and hit Control, Alt, and G, again, it's clipped to the circle. So this effect that I made to the hue saturation adjustment layer and changing the brightness, let's say, or changing the hue is only being made to the circle because it's clipped to this circle, and this circle is acting as a clipping mask. Now, this is a pretty simple example without a whole lot of applicability, so let's do another one. Here's a block of text that says Happy Holidays. Above that in the layer stack, I've got this snowy sort of image. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure that this snowy image is above the text document here, and then I'm going to click on it and I'm going to again clip it. So I'm going to hit Control Alt and G. There we go, make sure it's visible. And what it's done is it's clipped this image to the Happy Holidays. So the only place that you see the snow image is through the text. Now as you can see right here, the text obviously is misspelled, and so I can correct it. Now here's the great thing about using a clipping mask when it comes to something like this. I can click on this text layer and still edit it. Remember, it's a text layer, and as long as I haven't rasterized it, it's editable. So I can come right in here, make my change, click OK, and the edits are automatically applied to my mask. I don't have to use my brush. I don't have to do anything else like that. All I have to do is change the mask and it updates everything automatically. If it's text, I just change the text. So this is a really, really useful tool to use for something like that. One more final example. Here's a card layout that I put together in a previous tutorial, and I want to put some pictures of my daughters onto it. So I've got a picture of my daughter here. And I've got a picture of my other daughter right here. Okay, so how could I do this? Well, now I could drag them onto the document and then resize them and try and get them right and that sort of thing. But instead, before I even drag them onto the document, why don't I determine what the layout of my daughters is going to look like and where I want to place the pictures. Okay, so I'm going to get these out of the way. I'm going to go right over here. Now, I'm going to grab a shape layer. In this case, I'm going to grab a rectangle. My fill is set to black, but it doesn't really matter what my fill is, just as long as it's opaque, it's not transparent, and I don't have a stroke because I don't want a border around it. I'm going to select the shape layer, and then I'm going to just simply draw a shape in on my design right here and move it to the top of my layer stack. There we go. And that's one clipping mask, but now I'm going to create another one. I'm going to click on the layer, I'm going to hold down, switch to a move tool, and then I'm going to hold down on Alt, which is going to allow me to copy it, and I'm going to bring it over here. And when I've got my layout to the way that I want it, these are where my images are going to go, and I think that that looks okay. Then I'm going to bring my pictures onto my image. So I'll start with this picture. I'm going to just grab it. I'm going to select it, grab it off the layers palette, and bring it right here. Now it's going to tell me that it has a different depth than the source document. I'm just going to click Fine. And the image is going to be very, very big because it's a higher resolution than the card I'm working on. So in order to resize it, I'm going to hit Control and 0 to make sure that I'm seeing everything, and then using a free transform and holding down Shift to keep the aspect ratio the same. I'm just going to drag it down until it gets small enough where I can use it, and then I'll drag it right over here to that clipping mask. At that point, I can confirm the change and then get rid of that. Now, with this selected, all I've got to do is then again hit Control Alt and G, and the image is clipped right inside of this rectangle right here. Now, this saves me the difficulty of having to crop my image, because my image is automatically cropped right inside of here, and I can move it around right within this image to try and get it the way that I want it to look. If I want to make it smaller or larger, I again can just free transform it like I did before and work with it right within that clipping mask. I don't have to worry about how it's going to look cropped. I don't have to worry about anything like that because the mask is controlling the cropping. When I'm done, I can just click the OK button and it will apply the change. I'm going to do the same thing here with my other daughter. I'm going to grab her off. I'm going to select the image here. I'm going to grab her off of the layer stack and drop her right in. Again, it says that it's a different depth, meaning that the image of my daughter is a higher resolution. Am I okay with applying the new resolution? I'm going to just click yes. And I'm going to unclip you. Come up here, resize the image by holding down Shift, bringing it up to where I think it should be. Now, in this case, I've clipped one of my daughters to the first rectangle. What I'm going to want to do is I'm going to want to take my other daughter, my older daughter here, and clip her to this rectangle in the layer stack. So in order to do that, what I have to do is I have to take this image of my daughter, which is layer 3, drag it down on the layer stack till it's above the layer that I want to clip it to, which is rectangle 1, which is this rectangle here. I'm going to drag my older daughter's image over the rectangle, press Ctrl, Alt, and G, and again, the image is clipped right inside of this rectangle. I can move it around to size it the way that I want it to. If I want to make her smaller, I can just free transform the layer that she is on and approve the change. If I want to instead move the rectangles around, if I don't like the way that they're positioned, I can also do that. I can click on a rectangle and then I can move it to reposition it, and then of course I'd have to come back in and reposition my daughter over it. But using these clipping masks is a really easy way to determine what my layout is. And so then once I have my layout all set and I know where I want my pictures to go, at that point it's just a simple matter of grabbing my pictures, dropping them into the document, resizing them if I need to, and then applying the clipping mask with the Ctrl, Alt, and G shortcut. So that's it for now for clipping masks. Hope you enjoyed the tutorial. And I know that I moved fast on this. So if you have any questions about clipping masks or masking in general, feel free to leave them in the comments section of my website at trappinglight.com or on my channel at YouTube. Thanks for watching, everybody. I hope you have a great weekend.